You're listening to Legends and Shadows, where folklore and ghost stories are brought to life. I'm Vicky Joe, a voice actor and narrator, and together we wander through eerie myths, haunted places, and the tales that linger in the darker corners of our history. Tonight we go to a quiet hollow near Newton Abbot. It's a place hidden among trees and earth, where voices once gathered in secret, and where some say the past never stopped listening. This is the story of Puritan's Pit. You might expect a place like Puritan's Pit to be easy to reach. After all, it's just a hollow in the ground. But it isn't. Finding it takes effort. It's not signposted. The paths around it are unclear. And when you do finally reach the edge, you can't go any further. The pit itself is now boarded off, fenced in, kept at a distance. You can stand at the rim and look down into it, but you can't step inside the hollow the way people once did. You can't stand where the sermons were whispered. You can't occupy the centre of it. In the 1600s, England wasn't just politically divided. It was spiritually divided too. Puritans who refused to conform to the Church of England were persecuted. They were fined, imprisoned, and sometimes worse. Public worship could be dangerous, so people adapted. Across the country, dissenting congregations met in secret, in barns, valleys, quarries, wooded hollows, anywhere that offered concealment. Puritan's Pit was one of those places. Its shape made it ideal, as the earth itself absorbed sound. Sermons could be spoken quietly, but still heard by those standing close. But from outside the hollow, very little carried at all. It was clever, but it was risky. People had to arrive separately. No lanterns, no singing, no raised voices at all. Just always listening for the snap of a twig, the sound of a boot where it shouldn't be. Faith was practiced under fear. And that leaves a different kind of mark. What's interesting is that even now, long after that last secret sermon, the atmosphere of the pit hasn't softened. People describe it as heavy. It's not oppressive exactly, just attentive. You get the sense that the space is doing what it's always done, just listening. And once you start reading or looking into the stories attached to Puritan's Pit, a pattern emerges. Because the stories aren't dramatic. They're just subtle, quiet. And that makes them far more unsettling. The earliest stories talk about sound. People walking past the pit claim to hear murmuring, not clear speech, but something layered, as though multiple voices were speaking at once, low and indistinct. At first, it was just dismissed as imagination, just wind in the trees, maybe. But the same descriptions just kept cropping up. Voices that didn't belong to anyone visible. Not loud enough to frighten you outright, just enough to make you pause and listen intently. And pausing in a place like that just seems to be where the trouble begins. Another recurring detail is the sensation of being observed. People entering the pit often report an immediate awareness, not of danger, just one of attention, a feeling that something has noticed you. You turn, expecting to see someone behind you, but there's nothing there. One of the most persistent stories involves a particular gathering. A preacher is said to have been delivering a sermon here late one evening. Accounts describe his tone as unusually severe. It was less about faith and more about judgment, fire and punishment, rather than any comfort. Halfway through speaking, he just stopped. Those gathered waited, unsure whether he'd heard something. After a moment, he just tilted his head slightly, as though listening to something they couldn't hear. Then he said, very quietly, "He hears us." And nothing more. Moments later, people fled the pit, convinced they were about to be discovered. The people who fled the pit later returned, carefully in the daylight. They expected to find signs of pursuit, maybe broken branches, footprints, just something to explain that fear that sent them running. But there was nothing. The preacher was just simply gone. And it's right here that another story enters the record. Some say that on nights like that, nights when the pit was used, when voices were gathered and the fear was hanging thick in the air, a horse could sometimes be heard, moving through the woods beyond. Just slow, deliberate sound of hooves, where no path should be. A presence circling, rather than approaching. No one ever claimed to see the rider clearly, only the impression of a darker shape between the trees, and the sense that something had arrived to witness what was happening. It's never stated outright that the preacher was taken by this figure, but in some tellings, the two stories are no longer separate. Puritan's Pit doesn't look like a typical haunted place. It doesn't try to scare you. It simply holds on to what happened there. The centuries of whispered belief. That tension of knowing if they were discovered meant ruin. That kind of emotional energy has a way of settling on a place. And once it's there, it doesn't always dissipate. If you ever visit Puritan's Pit, it probably won't feel dramatic. Not at first. But stay long enough, and you may notice the way sound changes. You might hear the whispers, the voices, or even the sounds of the horse's hooves. And if you do hear those voices, faint, layered, or indistinct, don't answer them, or even stop to listen. That was the story of Puritan's Pit. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more folklore, ghost stories, and hauntings from Devon and beyond, follow the podcast and join me here on YouTube. This is Legends and Shadows. Until next time, keep your lantern close and beware the shadows.